Week 6 of the NFL is already here, and in this video, you're going to be informed on everything you need to know going to this week. Things like the games coming up, injuries, as well as the Jets firing head coach Robert Saleh will be discussed in this video. And if you guys want to see more content from this like me, make sure you guys subscribe and hit that like button so that I know. I really do appreciate it, and let's get straight into the video. So starting off here, let's look at the firing of Robert Saleh by the New York Jets. So obviously, this was kind of out of left field in my opinion. I do know that the Jets were underperforming, but looking at the situation, I thought it was more on the offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett. The offense for the Jets has been struggling, and we did see this a lot in the Vikings game, in my opinion, where we only saw Garrett Wilson really get on fire. People like Breece Hall and Braylon Allen were very limited, and I think that a lot of this falls on the weight of the offensive coordinator instead of the head coach. And if we're looking at some reports, there were actually some rumors that Robert Saleh was thinking about firing Nathaniel Hackett so that he could keep his job. And then we also look at some of the other drama surrounding the situation. Aaron Rodgers said that he wasn't even involved in the firing of Robert Saleh, which as the quarterback of the team, I do think that he probably was involved. He's just not saying it so that he can keep a pretty good representation, And now with Robert Saleh gone, the Jets have chosen their defensive coordinator, Jeff Ulbrich. I don't think I'm saying that correctly, but he is the new interim head coach, and I don't think that this is going to change too much. I do think that we might see a little bit more production out of the quarterback position, but I think most of it really just relies on the offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett. Alright, so now let's break down the games going into week 6, as well as talking about injuries from the teams as we go in chronological order. Starting off here, let's look at the Thursday night football game of the 49ers versus the Seahawks. So, looking at this game from basically the Bear point of view, we see that the 49ers are favored by 4 points, and we're seeing a pretty high scoring projection here from Vegas at 49 over under, right? Looking at the offense for the 49ers, we really saw Brandon Ayuk get more reception yards and more targets, which was definitely something that I thought was going to come, but he got over 100 yards last week, which is definitely something that wasn't expected. I thought that he was going to have a more gradual role, but once again, Brandon Ayuk is kind of like one of those guys that's almost like a boomer bust type player. And, just looking at overall the rest of this 49ers squad, I think that Jordan Mason's going to continue to get so many carries in this offense to just be a very efficient player. Obviously, there's a little bit of concern for Deebo Samuel, who had only around 3 fantasy points, if we're looking at it from that point of view. I think that he still is contributing to this team as far as winning goes, and obviously last week they had a very sad loss to the Cardinals where they're actually favored to win the game basically the whole time, right? We look at the prediction percentages. They were at above 80% during the fourth quarter, right? And I mean, we're looking at George Kittle. He was also pretty solid as well. But going over to the Seahawks side of things, right? They had another pretty sad loss where they lost by 9 points to the New York Giants, who just absolutely went off. Their passing game was amazing. They had pretty good run game. This is the Giants. And the Seahawks, I thought that they were going to be a lot better this game, but, obviously, going forward, I do think that we're going to get back into that mindset to where we see Geno Smith passing the ball a lot more, and we see people like DK Metcalf get a lot more targets and receptions. Also, the ground game really wasn't going for them. Kenneth Walker, I think, had less than 20 rushing yards, I believe 19 for 5 carries, so something that they're going to have to get back into action if they want to be a better team and be competing against this 49ers team, right? And honestly, they can win this game against the 49ers. It's really just dependent on how much they go to the run game, first of all, and if they're able to stop this 49ers explosive offense. But looking at it from kind of like the Bear point of view, this is 2 NFC West teams that are going to be duking it out. So I think that the 49ers do take this one because they are 2-3 right now, and they need to win some games if they want to make the playoffs. Next up, let's look at the Jacksonville versus Chicago game, once again in England. So last week, obviously, the Jets versus the Vikings game did not disappoint, so hopefully this one doesn't either. I mean, looking at the over-under right now, you have 42 points, so a little bit of a lower scoring game here. The Bears are favored by 2 points. And, overall, what I think right now is that the Jags really, their reliance is on Trevor Lawrence, like we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks. Trevor Lawrence really hasn't looked like that quarterback yet who was the #1 pick out of Clemson, right? And looking at someone like Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne, this is something to monitor, right? I mean, we saw Tank Bigsby get, I believe, 50% of this backfield from Travis Etienne, something that I definitely did not expect going into the season. And I really do like the play of Brian Thomas Jr. We saw this at LSU, right? Brian Thomas Jr. is one of those guys who's going to be able to stretch the field, and that's something that Trevor Lawrence likes to do a lot, right? But looking at this Bears defense, they're actually #2 in passing defense, so that's going to be something that the Jags are going to have to work on if they want to get something going. They're going to have to get their run game going, which they're actually #4 in the NFL right now. Looking at the Bears side of things, they're getting stuff going with Caleb Williams, which is definitely something that I like to see, right? We're seeing Caleb Williams, he had over 300 pass yards last week. DeAndre Swift had another very efficient week as well. DJ Moore is undoubtedly the wide receiver 1 in this offense, and with Keenan Allen coming back, we're going to see Caleb Williams be able to have more options to go to, as he also has Roma Dunze. Going into this game, I do think that the Bears are going to win, just because I don't really see Jacksonville being that good of a team this season. Next up, let's look at this Commanders-Ravens game, where I think it's going to be a lot closer than what Vegas is projecting. So right now they have the Baltimore Ravens winning by over under 6.5 points. The total points scored is at 49.5, so definitely one game that's going to be very high scoring. According to NFL Pro right now, the Commanders are actually the best passing team and the best rushing team in terms of efficiency, right? Looking at the Ravens defense, they're number 3 in rushing efficiency, and they're number 26 in passing, so definitely something that we could see with Jane Daniels airing the ball out. And last week, if you were in my stream, I did say that I thought that Jane Daniels was going to be pressured a lot by Myles Garrett in the Browns defense, who was number 5, I believe, in pressure, but he didn't seem phased at all, really, and he was still throwing absolute dimes. You know, there were a couple times where he did scramble at the pocket, like I say he was going to do. But I mean, going forward, I just think that Jane Daniels, he's just looking like a pro, right? He looks so poised. And I mean, looking at this Ravens offense, now we go there. I mean, we got Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. That run game looks amazing. They're actually number 2 in efficiency behind the Commanders. And then looking at the passing game for the Ravens, you know, something very sad for me is that Mark Andrews looks like he's just getting out of this offense completely. I mean, you had, I forget what their third string tight end's name was, but he had 6 snaps, and I think he had 2 touchdowns. And those are vultures from Mark Andrews and if Isaiah Likely if you're starting him. But I mean, looking at the team going forward, Derrick Henry is an absolute beast. He's a must-start running back if you have in fantasy football. Zay Flowers, I think he's going to start to get things going, right? Obviously, this Commanders passing defense is really bad, so we could see Lamar chucking it downfield to Zay Flowers like we did last week, where Zay Flowers actually had 111 yards against the Bengals defense, who was also pretty bad this year. But going into this game overall, I do think that the Ravens are going to take this game, but I don't think it's going to be by 7 points. I think we're going to see a lot closer of a game, but I do think it's going to be very high scoring. Next up, let's look at the Cardinals-Packers game, where I think this one's also going to be a pretty good one. I mean, looking at the passing defense for the Cardinals, right, they're 23rd in rushing, 31st in pressure rate. So, I mean, the same story with the Cardinals for this whole year with their defense. It hasn't been very good. I mean, looking at the Packers offense, I think that we're going to see a lot of yards go Jaden Reed's way. And if you were on my stream this Saturday, I did say that Jaden Reed was probably going to have a monster game against the Rams, which he did not. I'll own up to that. But I do think that, you know, going forward, we're going to see a lot more passing out of Jordan Love. Last game, we only saw, I believe, about 230 yards from Jordan Love. So I think we're going to see games where he does have like 300 yards and, you know, 280 yards. I think that he's going to be in the average of 260 to 70 yard range, right? Looking at the Cardinals side of things, right, their offense has looked pretty solid. Someone who's been a little bit inconsistent, really, is Marvin Harrison Jr., right? We see a couple games here where he's, you know, going absolutely nuclear, especially from a fantasy football perspective. But I mean, like, overall, last week he had 36 yards with 7 targets against the 49ers, right? But he had that one game against the Rams week 2. We had 130 yards in the first quarter alone and didn't get anything after that. But I mean, just like going forward, who I'm really excited to see from this game is probably going to be Jaden Reed, Josh Jacobs, Tucker Kraft as well, who's been a very good tight end for this Packers team. Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm interested to see how he plays going into this one, and then Kyler Murray as well. I'm interested to see basically if he's going to be able to keep up the passing efficiency that he's been doing, right? He had about 200 yards last week, so I'm interested to see if they're going to keep pushing it or if he's just going to stay constant at around the 200-yard range. All right, this is one of our first injuries here with the Texans versus the Patriots. Today, which is Wednesday, October 9th, the Texans did actually put Nico Collins on the IR free, so he's out for the next 4 weeks, which is not what you want to see if you're a Texan fan, right? So we're going to have basically Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell be the wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 in this offense. If you're looking at the target percentage share whenever Nico Collins was out last game, Diggs had around 30%, Dalton Schultz actually had around 20%, and Tank Dell had around 13%. So something to monitor is if Tank Dell is going to get more involved in this offense, which I think he will. I mean, we're looking at the injuries for the Texans right now. Joe Mixon's potentially not going to be playing, right? Obviously, we just talked about Nico Collins. So it's definitely going to be a tough one for the Texans to bounce back due to injuries. I do think that they win this game easily, but right now it's actually looking like one of the lower scoring games with an over-under of 41.5 by Vegas. The Texans are favored by 6.5 points. But I mean, looking at the Patriots side of things, right, you're going to have Drake May coming in as the starting quarterback. So this is definitely a spot where he could definitely succeed because this Texans defense honestly has been pretty subpar to start the year. Their passing defense has been alright. They're ranked number 9 in NFL Pro, but their rushing defense has been horrible. They're actually ranked number 27. So definitely a spot where we could see Ramondre get a pretty solid workload. But I mean, overall, you really can't start anyone out of this Patriots offense. We've done this for the whole season. It's not going to change unless Drake May just becomes Jaden Daniels. But overall, looking at this game, I think that the Texans win this one pretty easily. Next up, let's look at the Buccaneers versus Saints game. If you are in Florida or, Tampa Bay, really, I'm really praying for y'all with this hurricane. I hope that everything's okay with your houses. And I just really hope that you guys are right. I went through Hurricane Harvey in Texas and also Hurricane Beryl in Houston. So, thankfully that we were okay, but I just hope you guys are doing all right in Tampa with the hurricane. But looking at this game, right, Tampa is favored by 2 points. Also another low-scoring game here, projected with 41.5 over-under. Looking at the Saints side of things, you have no Derek Carr, so this is definitely one where it's going to be tough for the Saints to come back, right? Obviously, Olave last game did pretty horrendous without Derek Carr. He had one throw that was a pretty deep shot where he caught it, but it was reversed back for holding. Looking at someone like Rashid Shaheed, he's, obviously track star out of high school, so we know that he's just going to be a deep bomb threat, right? If Spencer Rattler's your starting QB, it's really tough to look at anyone in the Saints offense that's worthy of starting other than Alvin Kamara. But even looking at Alvin Kamara, he could potentially have a Devon Achane role, and where we saw Devon Achane, he's been having a pretty bad season since Tua Tagovailoa got out, and so Spencer Rattler is going to be someone like a Tyler Huntley level player. We could see that from Alvin Kamara completely. But I mean, looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we're seeing Baker Mayfield, he's continuing to target Mike Evans a little bit more than Chris Godwin. I think that this is something that's probably going to continue to happen as the season goes on. Cade Otton's definitely tied into who I think is pretty solid overall. Rashad White and Bucky Irving are continue to see like that 50-50 backfield split. I'm really more concerned on if Rashad White or Bucky Irving, who's going to take the backfield. I think Bucky Irving, like I've been saying for the past couple weeks, is probably going to take it just because of how efficient he is, but I don't know if they're ready to give up on Rashad White just yet, considering that it's only his second year in the NFL. Looking at this game overall, though, I do think that the Buccaneers are going to take this one pretty easily because Derek Carr isn't even playing in the game. Next up, we got the Browns versus the Eagles. This is another one where I kind of want to talk about injuries with, obviously, Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. They're going to be back. They're probably going to be fully healthy just because they had that bye week last week. And, I mean, looking at this overall, I think that the Eagles take this pretty easily. I don't know if there's much to talk about. They're favored by 9 points by Vegas, which is absolutely insane. But, I mean, just like overall, the Cleveland Browns have been super disappointing, especially Deshaun Watson, right? He hasn't had a single game over 200 passing yards yet. And, Amari Cooper is a very talented player, but he's not going to get anything if, Deshaun Watson's being a bad player. It's almost kind of like at a point where are you going to take Deshaun Watson out and you're going to put in Jameson Williams, right? Looking at the Eagles side of things, though, Jalen Hurts, I'm very interested to see how he comes out of the bye week. Same thing with A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Saquon Barkley, Dallas Goedert. This offense is loaded with big names, but it's really just dependent on, how they're able to execute. Their last game, we saw them get destroyed by the Buccaneers 33-16. Against this Browns team, I think that this should be an easy win, but, we never really know with this Eagles team. Next up, we got the Colts versus the Titans game. This one, honestly, is probably going to be close just because both teams are not very good. The Colts are actually favored by 1 point, but it's an over-under 43. So another low-scoring game. I mean, looking at the Titans, it's been a rough go-around for Will Levis. I kind of feel bad for the man, but it's just been a turnover machine. It's been tough, right? But looking at the Colts, obviously Joe Flacco stepped in as that quarterback last week. He was pretty solid, scoring 34 points against the Jacksonville Jaguars, where they ultimately lost. Now you're going to have Anthony Richardson stepping back in. So someone like, Michael Pittman is definitely not going to be someone you're very intrigued to start in fantasy. Same thing with Josh Downs. Jonathan Taylor is also going to be back from his ankle sprain. So that's someone that I'm looking at for having a breakout game. I really do like Jonathan Taylor's play, and obviously he could be hindered by Anthony Richardson with his rushing touchdown upside, but so far through the year we haven't really seen that. Anthony Richardson, I believe, only has 1 or 2 rushing touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor's at like 4, so nothing is really harming Jonathan Taylor as far as rushing touchdowns go. And then, we haven't really talked about the Titans too much, but it's really just Will Levis, right? If he's able to get stuff going, right? Tony Pollard is looking pretty good. Obviously, all the receivers, Calvin Ridley, D-Hop, Chico Okonkwo, their tight ends, all of that, all those players, they're going to be limited by Will Levis's play. But overall, I do think that the Colts are going to take this game, even with Anthony Richardson looking like a pretty subpar quarterback to start the year. All right, this game, I think, is going to be pretty good. The Los Angeles Chargers versus the Denver Broncos, right? The Broncos team is actually has a winning record right now, which is definitely not something I've expected. This game is over under at 37.5 points, which is super low scoring. The Chargers are favored by 3 points, but the reason why the Broncos are winning every game is their defense. I mean, we know defense travels, right? You know, sometimes your offense might not be there, but your defense is always going to be consistent. We look at their stats right now. The Broncos are the best overall passing efficiency defense, number 6 in rushing efficiency, number 4 in pressure rate. That is insane. They're probably the best defense in the NFL right now, according to those efficiency numbers. Looking at the Chargers, right? Everything really lies on Justin Herbert as a player, right? Coming out of this bye week, I wonder how he's going to respond. Obviously, he hasn't had a very good first half of the season. It's not even the first half, maybe like first quarter of the season is what I should say. J.K. Dobbins, he actually is getting more of the workload than Gus Edwards. I believe last game he had 65% of the snaps. I continue to look at this, and I think that he's going to get more and more snaps from Gus Edwards as time goes on. But someone I'm really intrigued for starting in fantasy football is going to be Ladd McConkey. I really think McConkey and Herbert are getting a connection going. But I think that this week, like we've seen before with Patrick Surtain guarding the wide receiver one, he's been locking them down completely every single week. So it's going to be really hard to start McConkey in fantasy. I think McConkey's more of a guy for a long value play going into the year. But I mean, looking at the Broncos side of things, obviously Bo Nix hasn't been like super spectacular. But I mean, your offense doesn't really have to be that good if your defense is absolutely destroying everyone, which is what they're doing right now. And honestly, I think that the Broncos are going to take this game just because of their defense. Next up, let's look at the Steelers versus the Raiders game, where the Steelers are favored by 3 points. Right now, the Raiders don't have, obviously, Davante Adams, and they haven't really got, you know, anything too much since about last week about Davante Adams, really. They're going to have Aiden O'Connell stepping in at quarterback, most likely. Alexander Madison's probably going to be their running back, but I mean, he's still probably going to split roles with Zamir White. This Raiders offense is very, very rough, right? Even the Steelers offense, you know, although they're not amazing, they do have a lot of rushing upside with Justin Fields. And, you know, Najee Harris isn't super efficient, but he was a solid running back last week. And, you know, I hope that we continue to see Justin Fields' passing game evolve as the season goes on. But, I mean, overall, just looking at this game, I do think that the Steelers' defense is going to probably propel them over the Raiders, just because the Raiders really don't have any coordination going for them right now. They really don't have anything in general going for them right now, except for Brock Bowers, who I think is going to be someone that's going to be a really, really good player, and I'm excited to see him develop. But, I mean, I just think that TJ Watt off that line is going to be too much for Aiden O'Connell to handle. All right, next up, let's look at the Panthers versus the Falcons game, right? The Falcons are favored by 6 points, over under at 47 points, so definitely a little bit more higher scoring. But, I mean, looking at the overall offense for the Falcons, right, I mean, obviously, Kirk Cousins last week, over 500 receiving yards, so everyone absolutely crushed. The one thing I want to look at, though, is that Kyle Pitts didn't really get too much of this reception target volume. I mean, he had 75 yards, which is about 20% of the total yardage from Kirk Cousins last week. Drake London absolutely destroyed Darnell Mooney as well. But someone I really want to look at is Bijan Robinson, right? I do think that he has the potential to bounce back. Obviously, I am a biased University of Texas fan, so I'm always going to root for Bijan Robinson. But, I mean, I think that, you know, going forward, Bijan's probably going to be a better running back than he was, especially last week with only about 60 rushing yards and, like, 17 receiving yards out of Kirk Cousins' 500 passing yards. So, I think as the season goes on, Bijan's going to get more involved in this offense. But looking at the Panthers side of things, Andy Dalton's going to, you know, be Andy Dalton now. He's not Superman anymore, sadly. Obviously, last game they got destroyed by the Bears 10-36. So something to look at really is if they end up playing Bryce Young again, if they think that it's time for him to step in instead of Andy Dalton, which is definitely something that's possible, right? Looking at, you know, Chuba Hubbard, who's going to continue to be this running back unless Jonathan Brooks come back. I think that once Jonathan Brooks comes back, we're going to see more of a split role, and then eventually as time goes on, potentially Jonathan Brooks could be the running back one for the Panthers. Looking at the receivers, Deontay Johnson is someone that is very appealing if Andy Dalton can get the ball moving. Last game, he obviously couldn't do that. Xavier Legette was hurt last week. I'm not too sure if he's playing this week. But, I mean, just like going forward, I think that the Panthers are a team that's really sketchy, in my opinion. And I'm going to have to take the Falcons in this one because I do think that Bijan Robinson is going to have a bounce-back game and Kirk Cousins is going to continue to dice up defenses. All right, this is probably my favorite game of the week other than Buffalo versus the Jets. Those two games are up there with the Lions versus the Cowboys, right? The Lions are actually favored by 3 points right now. Over under at 52 points. That is insane. That's like 26 points for each team, right? But looking at the Cowboys, right, they obviously had an absolutely crazy game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. on Sunday Night Football, where we saw Dak Prescott throw the game-winning touchdown. I mean, Dak Prescott did pretty well against that pretty rigid Steelers defense. I mean, it's hard to perform against the Steelers defense, I will say that. And I mean, going forward, Rico Dowdle looks like the RB1 for the Cowboys with, I believe, 18 carries, possibly 20. I always get even numbers mixed up, but I mean, looking forward, right, CeeDee Lamb right now, I believe, has been the wide receiver 14 in fantasy, and I think that as time goes on, they're actually projected the easiest schedule in terms of quarterback and wide receiver, so you could definitely target someone like CeeDee Lamb. I wouldn't mind that at all. Jake Ferguson is someone I really like a lot, especially with Dak Prescott continuing to target him. Looking at the line side of things, Gibbs and Montgomery are two guys who I love a lot. They've been showing a lot of efficiency running the ball, as well as being, pretty good receiving backs, especially Jahmyr Gibbs. And really what I want to focus on is, obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to be amazing. Jameson Williams is going to be that guy who's either going to get you 100 yards or no yards. Sam Laporta, though, that's someone I really want to focus on. I think that as time goes on, he's going to get more receptions and more targets as the season goes on, right? He's an absolute stud, right? Last season, we saw him be the best rookie tight end of all time, and I don't think that that's gone away, right? I just think that he's having a rough start to the season. But overall, I do think I'm going to have to take the Detroit Lions to take this game, just because I think that their offense is way too explosive. And, obviously their passing defense has been kind of subpar to start the year. It hasn't been horrible, don't get me wrong, but it's been okay, right? So I think that the Lions take this, but I do think that I'm siding with the sportsbooks here, where it's going to be a game that's going to be decided by 3 points. Honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, this game could be pretty solid too here with the Bengals versus the Giants, where we see the Bengals are favorited by 3.5 points, right? But I mean, looking at the overarching story, I guess, the Bengals have the second best passing efficiency team, and they're just a very explosive offense in general. And looking overall, Chase Brown might be sliding in as the RB1 with Zach Moss potentially being out with his ankle sprain, but Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are looking like two guys who are really solid receivers for Joe Burrow, especially Jamar Chase. But T. Higgins looks like the perfect wide receiver too for Joe Burrow, which we saw, 2 years ago before Joe Burrow was hurt, and T. Higgins obviously was hurt last year for a little bit as well. But I mean, now that everyone's kind of back together, they've been looking pretty solid overall, and they only lost by 3 points to the Ravens last week, which was very disappointing because they obviously had this game in the bag. They just lost it. Looking at the Giants side of things, though, I believe Malik Neighbors should be back from concussion protocol, so someone that I think is going to go off. Wan'Dale Robinson probably going to get back into his role, as well as a pretty solid wide receiver too in this offense. Devin Singletary is going to be back, so I believe Tyron Tracy was the running back in this situation. So someone to definitely, look at and see how he does against this Bengals defense, who has definitely been very subpar to start the season. And obviously Daniel Jones, he's actually been playing better than what I thought. Has he been playing up to his contract? Nope. But he's been, 257 yards, 281 yards in his last 2 games with 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Definitely pretty solid stats there from Danny Dimes. I was not expecting that, especially considering what happened last year with, him being so inefficient. But I think I'm going to have to take the Bengals to take this game. All right, this game is actually super low scoring with the Bills versus the Jets on Monday Night Football. It's at over under 41 points, where the Bills are actually favored by 2.5 points. And obviously, this is where we want to talk about, or I guess we already talked about Robert Saleh basically being fired. I do wonder how this is going to change everything for the Jets offensively. I don't know if it's going to do too much, right? Like we talked about with Nathaniel Hackett, I think that he was the guy who was supposed to be fired because obviously he's calling all the plays as the OC. But I mean, looking at this Jets defense, they've been number 4 in passing efficiency, number 8 in rushing efficiency, number 3 in pressure efficiency. So they've been a very good defense, and we knew that this was going to happen going into the year. I mean, looking at this overall, though, like, Josh Allen has been way too inconsistent of a quarterback for me to call him the MVP of this year, right? I think sometimes, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, is that Josh Allen looks like he's trying to do too much almost, and I think a lot of those turnovers happen because he's trying to do too much. Like, he'll, instead of throwing the ball out of bounds easily, he'll just chuck it up there and someone will get it, and it will get intercepted, right? Someone I really do want to look at, though, for the Jets side of things is Garrett Wilson. Obviously, he had a breakout game last week against the Vikings where he had 30 fantasy points, but I'm really interested to see how the firing of Robert Saleh fares for Aaron Rodgers, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, their big 3, really. I'm more interested in how that's going to handle. Obviously, like I said, with Nathaniel Hackett still being there, I don't know if too much is going to change, but I really do hope a lot does change, because I think that this offense for the Jets has a lot going for them, potentially, right? I think that they could potentially be one of the best offenses in the league, right? Right now, they're number 22 on offense for passing efficiency, number 28 for rushing efficiency, which is not where I thought that they were going to be at all, right? I think that this game's going to be another very close one, but honestly, I think I'm going to have to go with the underdogs with the Jets. Even though they have a new coach coming in, I do think that they're going to be, putting up a very good fight, especially considering that the Jets versus the Bills is another AFC East rivalry. So this is going to be a game where we're going to see a lot of butting heads. I don't know if Josh Allen is going to be able to perform against this Jets defense. I guess we're going to have to see, but overall, I do think that the Jets are going to take this one. All right, let's go into the bye weeks right here. So we have the Chiefs. Obviously, something I want to talk about that with them was that Kareem Hunt, even though he's dusty and old, is looking like the RB1 3-down back. And, that's something that I think is hopefully going to expand going forward. Also, Juju Smith-Schuster looks pretty solid, right? He's taking that role from Rashee Rice right now, but I don't know if he's going to be able to do this consistently, considering that he hasn't really been as good of a wide receiver since 2018. Looking at the Rams side of things, this is big, right? I think that whenever Week 7 rolls around, we're potentially going to see Cooper Kupp coming back, so this is definitely a good bye week for them. The Dolphins, definitely good because you have another week for Tua Tagovailoa to get some rest, and I think that Tua is the thing that the Dolphins are missing. And looking at the Vikings, I mean, bye week is a bye week for the Vikings. They get some rest. They've been a very good team overall to start the year, 5-0, which is absolutely insane and not what I expected at all. And I mean, coming off the bye week, they're going to go against the Lions, so definitely something that they're going to need if they want to be, fully set against the Lions. But I mean, overall, get some good bye weeks there, and very important, for some of these teams to get some rest. All right, y'all, and that is the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for sticking around. I really do appreciate it. I really hope that you guys gain some knowledge going into this next week. I hope that, obviously, if you guys don't agree with my opinions, you can leave them down in the comments below. If you did, make sure you guys leave a subscription, and make sure you guys like the video so you guys know whenever my videos come out, right? I will be streaming this Saturday again, I believe, just kind of going over stuff for fantasy football. If you want to, join, you can. It's always open. Not sure what time that's going to be, but probably around 11 a.m. Central to 3 p.m. Central start time. So I'm leaving everything in my description, and that includes my Twitter, that includes my blog, that includes my TikTok. So if you guys want to check out that stuff, it is in the description below. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.